Hello and welcome everybody to episode 50 of Coffee with Campus Consultancy. Today we have 6 amazing guests, starting with Julian, who I'll introduce in just a sec, to talk with you all about student engagement, student support. Basically, how do you help students, whether you are a student running a club or a staff member working with your students on campus or online, how do you help students love what they're doing and get the most out of it? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So to kick things off, our first guest is Julian O'Shea. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Julian. Julian is an award-winning entrepreneur, educator, social entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Unbound, an organization that works with students and runs programs across the Asia-Pacific region. He's the inaugural director of the Wattle Fellowship at the University of Melbourne, and most recently has just gone viral on TikTok. Julian, welcome.
It's good to be here.
Mate, TikTok. Tell me about it. This is insane. This is insanity.
Well,
Speaking of...
Yeah, as you said in your intro, I run an organization called Unbound, which is all about taking students and giving them great leadership experiences overseas. And as I'm sure everyone knows, that's not been happening much in the year 2020 or 2021. So I've turned my hand to trying to keep doing education, but doing it in a different way, making the most of video. So whether that's on YouTube and just recently this weekend, TikTok.
Mate, talk to me about, and Ashani, hello, great to see you there. We're intrigued by this as well. Talk to me about taking something online. You run an organization. We have a call in March last year going, oh my gosh, this COVID thing, how are students going to go overseas? And you've pivoted massively in this online space. So what's the thinking behind that, taking what you do into an online world?
Well, here's the thing. Even though you can't travel, the world isn't less global. You know, companies are still trading, as we saw, as the Suez Canal got blocked and it impacted everything. People are still working for multinational companies. People are still, very much focused on the Asia-Pacific region. So you can't stop learning about it. The culture still matters. There's still a lot to be done, but you can't physically be there. So a lot of our stuff we've done has still tried to keep the strong connection of overseas, and there've actually been some benefits. So rather than traveling to one place, hanging out in rural Nepal or cities in India, we've been able to dial in social entrepreneurs from lots of different countries to collaborate on interesting projects.
Super cool. Talk to me a little bit about online in a live setting, kind of what we're doing now, like you just said, dialing people in, and online in a pre-recorded setting. YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn videos. How do you think about those two different mediums? Yep.
Look, people get Zoom fatigue. It's a real phenomenon. And I think one of the reasons is that what you often gets lost when you move into the online space is the fun part. It's often not as fun. You're just looking and learning and listening. Whereas some of the things that we've done at Unbound is try to keep that. So I'll just share 2 quick things. One is that we had a Bollywood dance class. So we had a dancer in India, in Mumbai, dialing in. Everyone had their phones and their computers hooked up, and we're all learning these amazing moves in our own lounge rooms and bedrooms. So to really kind of keep that vibe, we did something else that was fun. We held a graduation Vietnamese dinner where everyone in their own respective homes pressed Uber Eats button at the same time and had their own different food in their own places, and we did our chat like that. So finding ways to make it fun and interesting is something that we've really prioritized at Unbound. And then in the recorded space, the thing that's worth learning is that there's so much to learn in our own cities. So a lot of the videos I've made have been trying to reflect on culture and design, but locally, and making videos that do that. And, the quality of the camera on your phone is just remarkable. So you can make some really cool stuff with very little resources.
That's insane. Talk to me about the idea of making those videos fun. We're engineers by training. You've gone out and you haven't just made your videos, comical, even though you are a comedic genius, too far to say. You're hilarious. You do comedy fest and whatnot. So you've got that skill set. You've actually got that as backbone, but you're making these videos engaging. So like if someone's listening in, they say, okay, Julian, cool, I get it. I'm going to get into the online space. I'm going to make a video, post a TikTok. Any top tips for making those videos pop, for making them fun?
The biggest one is share the thing that you are genuinely excited about. And if you are excited about it, you probably know a lot about it. Like, you read about it, you're interested in it, stuff that you really love to do. And I don't think it matters how niche or nerdy that is. As you said, I made a video about these little blue squares on the poles in Melbourne. And what they do is they point to fire hydrants. Now, this sounds like the geekiest, nerdy, kind of very niche topic, but people found it really interesting because they learned something about the city. They can connect with it because they see it, even if they don't use them because they're not fireys. But it's that level of sharing what you love, because your passion will come through and your knowledge certainly will.
I love that. What's something that, in terms of developing knowledge, that you've learned over this process, whether it's a technical skill in terms of editing and creating, or just something fun you've learned in the city that you like telling people about? Is there a top kind of learning in the last year or so?
There is something you can do, which is kind of curate your information diet. So, you know, find people that do stuff that you really like and follow them, and then just look at their work through a lens of understanding. Why do I like this? What did they do? What was the specific step? What about this do I find interesting? And borrow and steal from the best. You know, like there's a lot of great things out there. I think that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And the internet is amazing. If you type almost anything into YouTube, you'll get given a how-to, exactly whatever it is that you want to make or create. That's
super cool. Jules, I know you've got an upcoming program coming up with Unbound. When you think about that, when you're a few weeks out or a few days out, what are the sort of thoughts or things that are running through your head when you say, you know, I want this to be as good as it can be for students? Are there any things you come back to or things that have changed going through a few iterations in the online world?
Yeah, I think a big one is that it shouldn't be about me and what I'm sharing. It should also be about the connections with each other. So I think a lot of the times when you go to a conference or an event, the highlight isn't always the person on the stage. In fact, it's often not, but it's the conversations you have during morning tea and the people that you're sitting next to. So I put a lot of emphasis in kind of cohort building. So I'm willing to lose an entire lesson to just let people interact with each other. So introductions, what do people have in common? Where are their connections? So if they leave this with friends, colleagues, connections, and networks, that's a success, more than just me imparting my experience.
That's super cool. Reminds me of a book I read recently. Adam Grant was talking about how he used to leave I think it was a lesson open in every class that he taught. So say he taught a 12-week class, he'd leave one open and kind of co-design it with students. And part of it was saying, he'd go to them and go, what's missing from this course? Like, you're halfway through. That's what I did teach you. Here's the next half. That's what I'm going to teach you. What have I missed? And eventually they'd started like co-creating these things. And more often than not, he'd find that that would usurp one of the other classes next semester. So the idea was by the end of it, he'd kind of like put these blocks in all these parts of his course by students, and he'd still have that day open to say, what am I missing now? What am I missing now? And it kept it fresh and updated. So I like that idea.
I think people often go the other way, where they've put too much content in and they cut some of these things which are, I think, the most worthwhile. Like, we'll just have a very short morning tea break today because we've got a lot to get through. Whereas you're like, that was the gold, you know, this is the time when people can connect and interact.
I love it. Julian, speaking of connecting and interacting, I know you've got a lot to do. It's been really nice to reconnect, re-interact with you today. I've got one final thing before you go. Fill in the blank. To get students engaged, you need to
give them the opportunity to connect with each other.
I love it. Julian, you're amazing. Thanks for coming on. We'll link everything to Unbound in the show notes when we whack it up on YouTube and podcast. Wish you all the best, my friend. Good luck on TikTok.
Real pleasure. All the best.
As always. Bye. Alrighty, my friends. We are 1 out of 6 guests in today. 60 minutes, Coffee with Campus Consultancy, episode 50 coming to you. Our next guest, really excited to bring him up in the waiting room already. Look at that, on time and early. Jeremy, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Very, very well. How about you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. Mate, thanks for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
It's really nice to have you on. Knowing you're someone who believes that opportunity is something that should be evenly distributed, and even though there's talent all over the place, opportunity is not always equally available. Your role, head of university partnerships at Forage, formerly inside Sherpa, you're on a mission to ensure students everywhere can access work experiences that empower them to discover their careers, the things they're passionate about. And today, mate, I'm really excited to chat to you and go into this in a little bit more depth in terms of support and skills. So I'd love to start, if it's okay with you, in terms of that support angle. And maybe it's worth giving a little bit of color what Forage is and who you are and what you do. And then I'd love to know, how do you set students up for support? How do you make sure that they're supported throughout the whole journey?
Yeah, no problem. So just as a bit of background, as you touched on, Forage, we're a education technology company on a mission to ensure that everyone around the world has access to work experience. So, you know, I remember back when I was at university, studying with a guy who was just unbelievable. He was the person I turned to whenever I was stuck during my law degree. And then fast forward to when we were applying for jobs, and we had like this really different experience. Well, I was really fortunate to get around a range of job offers and interviews, whereas my friend didn't, and I couldn't quite understand why. And what I realized was, he came from a single parent family. Mum had a pretty severe disability, which meant she couldn't work, and he worked really long hours to support the family and put himself through university. And all that to say, that's a long-winded way of saying, not everyone is able to access work experience. So we built Forage to create an environment where everyone can just jump online as simply as they could on somewhere like Netflix. And instead of watching TVs or movies, you can actually do work experience programs with some of the world's biggest companies like JP Morgan, Citi, Accenture, BCG, KPMG, Deloitte, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
In terms of, jumping now. Oh, sorry, go on there.
No. You were going to segue into it, so go for it.
Yeah, in terms of jumping into, what do students need in terms of support? I think what it really comes down to is, in my eyes, it's an insight into what careers actually look like. I think this is particularly important in the context of COVID. Historically, students had this opportunity to understand what different careers look like by going to in-person networking events, where they could actually just ask people in the job, what does a day in your life look like? Or by actually going in and doing work experience in person, where you get the chance to shadow people and do the job. But as times are changing, particularly rapidly over the last year or so, with fewer in-person events, with large chunks of the workforce, working from home, I feel like there's a real risk that students actually transition from their jobs, from their university to jobs where they actually just don't know what they're doing or why they're going into this job. So from my perspective, I think students need more than ever, an insight into what different careers look like.
And when they get that insight, if someone was to say, okay, that makes sense, they come along, they do this digital experience, but they couldn't possibly get the same level of support that they would in an office place, or they're not actually sitting at a desk with someone if they're doing it online. How do you sort of help students get over that idea that they might be in their bedroom, and yes, it's at JP Morgan, but JP Morgan in my bedroom? Like, how do you get over that sort of like dissonance and gap?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because, to be honest, for so many of us in the workforce these days, we're actually working from our bedrooms.
Great point.
Anyway, so the gap of the change is certainly not as significant as it would have been historically. But what we, seek to do is try and take this blended approach and make it a really interactive experience for students. So, being able to see videos from partners at JP Morgan or directors at JP Morgan who are, giving them tasks in the exact same way that they would give interns tasks in person, so that students can undertake these tasks but not feel that real sense of nervousness to perhaps jump into their very first bit of work experience. So we want to provide a nice confidence building environment. It doesn't replicate everything of being there in person, but it's designed to give you an opportunity to try it out, where nothing can go wrong and you can really just get a feel for what's out there.
Yeah. And in those situations where it doesn't go wrong, but it is a challenge, obviously you can get a video from someone that says, do this, but how do students put their hand up? How do they say, well, I don't know how to do that? If they do get stuck, what does that look like online? Because I think the way that you've handled it would be so helpful for so many others tackling this sort of online delivery space. When a student puts their hand up, how are you there to support?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate to have a pretty incredible customer support team that are available to help students all around the world when they're participating in virtual work experience programs. So that's, that's fantastic. And at the moment we have over 1.5 million participants around the world doing these virtual work experiences. So it's no easy feat to provide that support. Beyond that, I think there's 2 additional things that are really important for course designers to think about. One is, being really mindful up front of providing as much support and guidance as you can to minimize the risk of students getting lost or stuck during their participation. And the other is sort of at the conclusion of the task, being able to provide students with meaningful feedback via, in our case, we do it via self-reflection and model work. So we give students actual tasks, the same task that they've done, which has been done by an actual employee from these firms, so that they can compare and contrast their work with that of an expert and really understand where they've done well, where there's areas for improvement, and so on.
Cool. And that sort of ties into that analytical thinking skill as well, right? So yes, I've done this, but I've also reflected it and compared it to something. So I've also got that other skill now, as opposed to just doing it, submitting an assignment and getting a 63, which doesn't tell you an awful lot about the skill that you may or may not have developed. Cool.
Yeah, totally. I think reflection is everything, right? Like, it's all well and good to learn a skill. But if you're not sitting there and actually reflecting on what you've just done, sometimes it's not all that impactful and doesn't stay in your mind for all that long. For sure. Tarzan's jumping in on the comments here. And of course, if anyone would like to comment, share a question or ask a question, feel free. This is two-way, three-way. I don't know. The point is we can answer your question. So if you've got a question, put it in the comments. We'd love to see it. Tarzan's jumped in and saying that I think students need more exposure to skill-based courses rather than basic covering degrees. So in terms of that skill development, I'd love to dig into this very quickly in the last minute or so with you, Jeremy, around, are there any particular skills that you find through the feedback or what students are requesting, or even in their own self-reflection, top skills that they're getting out of these digital experiences? Yeah, totally. So exactly as Tarzan just mentioned, universities are really great at teaching students academics. But they're not necessarily, the best places to be able to teach students, what you're going to do in the world of work. And there can be a whole variety of different reasons for that. It can be, perhaps academics with limited exposure to industry, or it may be, curriculum that was designed a little while ago. So what's really fantastic about the virtual work experiences is the opportunity for students to sort of get hands-on experience using the actual tools that you use in industry. So, exactly as Tarzan mentioned, it's really about, say, for example, if you're doing a JP Morgan Chase software engineering virtual work experience program, using the actual technology and the actual frameworks that JP Morgan use day in and day out. Say you're, doing a BCG strategy consulting program, using the frameworks that consultants at BCG use day in and day out. So it's learning those highly practical, transferable skills that you will use day to day in your job, whatever industry that might be.
Very cool. Mate, I'm really appreciative of your time. I want to give you one fill in the blank to finish off our little segment today. In your own words, great engagement for an online program, for a learning experience, for skill development. Great engagement means what?
Yeah, so it's really simple. I feel like almost every fill in the blank is the same. It's understanding and caring about students. If you do that, that is the key driver for everything we do, and it's been the reason why we've had 1.5 million students doing these programs in just a couple of years since we started.
Unreal. Jeremy, you're a gentleman. Thank you so much for your time. We'll link everyone through the Forage so they can find out more, and we'll speak soon.
See you.
All right. See you, mate. Oh, Jeanette, I zapped you in before I meant. This is my technological skill and prowess really on show.
It's pretty incredible, Josh. Blows me away every time.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. I'm excited to speak to someone who actually has technical prowess and expertise. Jeanette, we are stoked to have you, especially as someone, CEO and founder of the Hacker Exchange, who wears so many hats and does so many cool things. Thanks for making some time today.
Look who's talking. Nice to be here.
Well, you're too kind. I want to dive into something as a little bit of a change of pace today we've talked a little bit around student engagement, what it means, going online. One big part of going online is how you build up your personal brand online and where the opportunities lie for leaders, for staff, for students to engage students in their community through their brand. So I'd love to speak to you a little bit to start with around how did you start working on your personal brand and what does that mean to you as someone who plays so heavily in this student engagement space?
You know, personal brand is one of those words that I think it makes a certain kind of person cringe. It makes us feel a little bit, you know, dirty that we don't want to be working on a personal brand. But at the end of the day, my perspective is your personal brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. And so just taking a little bit of time to think about what impact do you want to leave? What kind of comments do you want people to make about you? If someone asks for a referral, what do you want them to say? So that's what I think, you know, personal brand means to me. And when it comes to building that out, no matter what profession you're in or whether you're a student, we're really lucky at the moment that we've got plenty of opportunities to do that. So just to give some really practical examples of what I did when I was starting out in this space was to get involved in as many meetup groups as I can. So these days it might look like Facebook engagement groups, it might look like live meetups when they come back, and then actually volunteering to help organise things. That's one of the biggest life hacks I can actually provide to someone trying to build their personal brand is figure out the people that you want to be around and figure out a way that you can help organize them. So even if it's volunteering at events, pulling together things, because all of a sudden you're the person at the front of the room with the microphone. All of a sudden you're the person whose name they recognize. So that's one of the biggest hacks I can give to any students out there or anyone building their personal brand. There's plenty more. I mean, we can go into more, Josh, if you want me to.
Hey, share us a couple more. And I think what'll be interesting here is, and what maybe one way where we want to orient this is personal brand. We understand this from like if you're an influencer, if you're an entrepreneur, obviously your reputation really matters. But where I see this as a huge opportunity that I don't really think is always tapped into is if you're leading a student community, if you're a student club president, or if you're in a student startup, or if you're a university staff member who's trying to rally students and they connect with you on LinkedIn after the workshop, but then sort of, do they ever hear from you again? How do you think that personal brand can be tapped into to get more students involved, to get them coming back, and to get them to say, you know, Hacker Exchange has such a great brand. People know what it stands for. It's cool. It's fun. It's always ahead of the curve. It's innovating.
Thanks.
How do people get that across in their own brand?
Well, you know, I think it does start with that concept. You think about what you want them to say about you, and then think about what are the core messages that I can continuously just drip feed into my channels that might help to sort of build up on those messages. So, for example, you talk about being ahead of the curve. That's one of the things that we're very proud at Hacker Exchange, and one of the core reasons people join our programs, because our stuff is updated like every month, every program, it's a fresh content. And so in order to make sure that people understand that from a branding perspective, we will drip feed, you know, articles, our newsletters will always be showcasing new things, but it's also a behavioral element. Everyone in our team, and me personally, we read widely, we make sure we're engaged with new content, because, you know, you live it, then you share it, and then all of a sudden that's what you're known for. So I think that that's something that, you know, students can really tap into if they're student leadership roles. If you're trying to get people to rally, think about why they join that society and how can you help to drive their interest in that. And likewise for staff, if you're trying to bring, you know, students into groups or engagement, why do you think that they initially showed interest, and how can you reinforce that interest?
I love that. That's brilliant. For people who've gone through your programs in an online space, and obviously we had Jules on a little bit earlier, so huge pivot there with Hex. People who've gone through your online programs, what are some of the things you're hearing that makes you think it's working? And what are some of the things in maybe the early stages that you were looking out for to figure out, or to be sure, is this actually working? Does that make sense? Like, what are you looking for to figure out, is it working, and is it working?
Go with the is it working kind of first, because one of the biggest flags for me that it is working is when people build a lasting relationship with someone in the program and continue that post-program. So when I see people catching up in real life, or posting, you know, videos of them having an Instagram catch up, or even just connecting with an industry professional that they met, you know, maybe letting me know they're having coffee with someone at Google that they met, that's when I know it's working. And so that sort of really talks to that community building aspect of the program.
Let me press that, because I think it's such a good point. How do people let you know? So if they've caught up with Google, how does that information get back to you?
Well, it's really, I don't know if it's maybe a once again a community sort of value that we've tried to put into practice, but we're all about shouting loudly about our alumni, especially when they've done cool stuff. And I can almost set my watch by it, Josh, like 6 months after they finish a HEX program, I'll get messages from people saying that they've just started a new project, or they've actually launched the thing they were building, or they've got a new job. And so, you know, in our newsletter monthly, we celebrate the wins that we hear. And then we ask actively in our alumni group on Facebook and on LinkedIn, what's going on for you? Our community lead, Eleanor, who's incredible, she has active relationships with many of our alumni. And then we've got another group of students that we kind of call student engagement leads. So they're also more peer ambassadors. So through all these little channels, we get the good news and we make sure that we amplify it because we have a platform. So I think, once again, it's that reinforcement of behaviour. People see that we share good news and then they want to be part of that as well. So just really encouraging and inviting the feedback has been really worked for us.
That's so cool. And what I really want to underline here is, I don't want to embarrass you on this point, but I just think it's so important. It's like, you're the CEO, you're running this, you've got everything in the COVID world, you're running a business, you've got staff, you've got all that going on. And when I asked you like how you saw like new students were, you know, it was working, you said you saw them in person. It's on Instagram, it's LinkedIn, it's email. You're actively asking, you're putting it in a newsletter. You know, like the amount of different places I think you're looking, the more you look, the more you'll see. And it's amazing how many, and then you can champion them and amplify. So actively ask and then amplify. I'd love to know what that would look like if every department of every uni amplified and activated students every week or month. Like, they're doing cool things.
It is, and you know what? I would almost suggest that most university programs will have this content somewhere, right? And so, you know, we've also kind of created this culture internally at the team that if one of us spots something, it's a screenshot and shared in a particular channel. So we actually, you know, again, it all comes down to the micro behaviors that you can embed in your team, that you become kind of business culture, which become community culture. And so I think it all does kind of stem from, you know, lived behavior and example setting, and as you said, just scanning really widely, because I guarantee all of those uni programs out there, your students are probably saying something on LinkedIn. If you're not actively scrolling and looking for that comment and screenshotting it and using that caption and asking them if they don't mind adding it to your blog, you're losing out on SEO, you're losing out on kind of, you know, future testimonials. So anyway, I'd rather be a little bit too much than a little bit less than that.
That's so cool. That's so cool. It's so funny. It's funny you say that. Like, I have this folder on my desktop that I call Impact. And it's like, that's the most important folder on my laptop. There's the business folder and all that stuff that is like, that's the one. And even this morning I was jumping on the LinkedIn messages in a student, hey, I was in the workshop in March and I just feel like it can help people more, and like screenshot, throw it in there. And those moments I think are like, it's not just good for the student. It's not just good for SEO. It's also just so good for the soul to like see that. It's like, it's working, you know? Yeah.
I mean, the reality, Josh, is that everyone who's on this call, like, we could all be doing something else. Like, we could all be working at a bank, or we could be, you know, working at a retail store, or, you know, there's lots of different things we could be doing. And we choose what we do because it gets us out of bed in the morning and because it has something that pays forward to the world. And, you know, I totally resonate with that. I get out of bed in the morning because I want to see, you know, this new generation ready and upskilled and confident to found, lead and invest in the businesses that are going to take us forward. And, you know, the more I can see that happening, the more energy I'll have in the day. So it's really very self-serving.
I love that. I love that. That's amazing. Jay, with lots to do, I want to ask you a final question, a fill in the blank. To engage students, a successful team must what?
To engage students, a successful team must love what they do and have a lot of fun. Because if we're having fun, it comes through the screen, and students have fun too.
I love that. If we love what we do, it comes through the screen. Students love that too.
Yeah, awesome. I think so.
Jay,
anyway.
You're
Thanks for having me.
I think so too. Thanks for being quick and valuable as always.
Pleasure, and what an honour to follow some of your other speakers as well, and look forward to seeing the rest of them.
You too, good Jay. I'll speak with you soon.
See ya.
Bye. Cool. How about that? We're halfway through, my friends. So today You've heard from, if you're joining us on this LinkedIn live stream, you've heard from Julian, CEO of Unbound. Make sure you check out Unbound and everything that they are about, what they're doing in the online space is so cool. You heard from Jeremy, head of Forage, doing amazing things, particularly if you're a student and you're tuning in and you're like, how do I get my first internship? How do I get experience if I don't have any experience? Check out Forage. What you can do online free for students is super, super cool. And then Jeanette coming on talking about the Hacker Exchange. Their programs are amazing. And if you can subscribe to their newsletters, if you just looked at their newsletters and then said, how do I make a newsletter that good? Myself included, I need to look at their newsletters and make a newsletter that good. I wouldn't be able to do it though. They're incredible. Check them out. It's just so, so cool. What they do in their community is amazing. Nice. And we've heard from 3 experts who've worked inside and outside of the universities. Our next guest I'm going to bring on is Stephanie Parma. And in just a sec, I'll bring Steph on to give you a bit of a perspective from what it's like inside the university. So without further ado, Steph, g'day.
Hey, Josh, how you going?
I'm really well. How are you doing?
Good.
Very, very good. I'm going to ask you some questions if you're up for it.
I'm ready. I am.
I love it. So firstly, being student programs officer in careers at RMIT, graduating from RMIT, business, marketing, working with Forage, being passionate about helping students and see the sort of changes in their life, employability outcomes. I'd love to know just a little bit from your perspective, really high level, but what's it been like being in a university over the last year or so, and particularly with all the changes that have been happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been crazy. It's been crazy for everyone, right? And I think it's been, being on your feet the whole time, trying new things. I think that's our biggest thing at the moment, just trying new things. A new system comes out. Let's try it, Teams has implemented something new. Let's try it. How is it going to engage students? What are we going to do, to get students enjoying themselves? Because I think, like Julian said before, it's not as fun online. It's really hard to get students engaged and have them enjoy themselves when it is in front of a computer screen that they've been doing all day with all their other classes.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that obviously there is so much room for innovation. There's so much opportunity. I'd love to know from you, what have you tried that's maybe worked? What are some success stories? What are some things that you think, yeah, we're definitely going to do that again to keep your audience, to keep your students engaged?
Yeah, look, one thing that just sticks out, and we ran this session, we've run it now twice and we're running it again next week. We run this live mock interview. So we bring in an industry professional and we get a student, and they do quite literally a live job interview, and they do a really bad one to start off, and that getting students involved, like I said before, being interactive for students is so important, and bringing things online changed that a lot. It wasn't so much harder to get students to be interactive, or anyone to be interactive, when you're sitting in front of a screen. So live mock interview, we have an industry professional come in, got our student that's maybe about to graduate, and they do a really bad interview, sitting like this, with their phone in their hand. Those really crappy things that people do in an interview that students may not realise, but they do happen. And they do a bad interview. We get the students to comment on it throughout the session, what was bad? Like, oh no, and the students are commenting, oh no, why is her light off? Why is she, answering her phone to her mum during the interview? And yes, it seems silly, but it does happen. And showing students that in a fun way and getting them to be interactive during that. And then we have the industry professional. It's usually a grad recruiter, someone in HR and recruitment, talking about why that was bad and how that student could improve next time. And then we go into a great interview, and we show them how to do a perfect interview, even whether it is in person or online in front of the computer. And then we have a live Q&A at the end. So having students to enjoy themselves during a session rather than just reading off slides, because we know that's just not going to work in this day and age.
That's brilliant. And I'm sure someone much wiser than me did this intentionally. But you know what that made me think of? I've been obsessed with this idea of, we talk about Zoom fatigue, which is a thing, but no one's complaining about Netflix fatigue. No one's complaining about Instagram fatigue. Like, or if they are, they're like, we're still doing it though, maybe there is fatigue. But it's like this idea that going on the screen is a problem. It's like, no, it's not. We've been on screens for decades now. But what I've always been curious about is the fact that when you're on a Zoom, it's two-way interaction, like you're engaging. And what I think you've described there is it's almost like you're watching a show. You're watching a bad interview, like you'll watch bad reality TV. And then you kind of sitting back and kind of commenting and reflecting. And then you watch a good interview and you sit back and you comment and reflect. And it seems like it's that step before, hey, come to a Zoom, you're going to be on the interview, which all of a sudden is, it's kind of like you're going on TV. It's kind of flips it. So that's funny. I wonder how that was. I'm just trying to think of there must be so many applications where it's like watch the Zoom rather than be in the Zoom, and where there could be other applications for that.
And I think that's a great point, though. Think about, we watch TV, might be watching maths, God, love maths. And, we're texting our friend at the same time, oh my God, did you see what just happened? Yeah. And I think having the students to be like, no, why are they doing that in the interview? Being involved, which, like you said, we all see in front of the screen, whether it's TV screen, our phone screen, our computer screen, but how to do it a little bit differently. And that's what we're really trying to do. That's
cool. That's a really, really cool approach. This is not the place for me to just think and be very boring to watch, but nonetheless, I'm going to. That's cool. All right, I like it. Some of the other awesome things that you've been doing, there's tons of examples that come to mind for me in terms of the first year week and these other particular weeks. Have you changed any of the approaches in the work that you might have done 2 years ago or even a year ago into 2021? Have you changed anything given that people are now maybe getting more used to being online? How do you think about that?
Yeah, look, we now, so with the Future Edge program, we'd run workshops and events throughout the year to help students, stand out to employers, get employable. And we've now moved into a way of, we run series. So like you said, we did our first year fundamentals, and it was all about getting ahead of the game, getting your resume ready, getting, understanding how people got their jobs or getting started in their career. The next week, we're running our Get Employable series based for business students, but it's available to all RMIT students, and a week of events that to get them employable, to show them that there are things you can do out there that will help you get employable, even if it is behind the computer screen at home. And so that's really, running these series has been a big change for us. It's something very different, but it allows students to, between their classes go, I really want to watch that live mock interview. I really need help with my resume. I'm going to go to that resume workshop. Or how can I stand out with no experience? You run our great workshop for us for that, and students can join in and watch while they're doing other work at the same time. And I think that's a big thing as well, that you don't need to always be there 100% of the time if you've got other things to do. But if you were sitting in a lecture, you couldn't be watching something at the same time. But we all know as students, we can multitask. That's our greatest asset. And to watch a panel, to watch a panel at the same time as you're doing an assignment and hear something go, oh crap, I can actually add that into my assignment while I'm listening. We all, we watch TV at the same time as being on our phone. Why can't we watch something like this that we're doing today, a chat while doing something else?
That's so, Steph, this is so interesting. This is what I've been waiting for, to try to see some innovation in this space of to turning university into TV. And those both are examples of doing that. I'd love to see an event that every event has a sticker, which is this is 100% focus, or this is a multitask. I don't know, maybe that's sending the wrong message, but nonetheless, this is you can have this on in the background kind of event, rather than, I know with all my events, I so want people to be there. I want them to be in it. I'm please turn your cameras on. Whereas there might be some people who just say, I'd love to just listen in the background while I'm, walking the dog or
catching the train to uni when it takes 2 hours for some students,
Yeah, which then leaves an opportunity to almost at a concert or something, you have the VIP section, you have the people at the front who are going to ask the questions. And there is if you want to be up the front, be up the front. But then you have that at the back of the room where you can observe, which is different in that school classroom model. Okay, cool. You always give me new things to think about, Steph. This is great. Those two insights are so cool. I hope that's given people who are tuning in some different ways to think about it. What does it look like if we engage like TV, like social, or in the traditional model? Time is short, but I want to give you one more thing. And I want to ask one more thing before I let you go. From a staff perspective, fill in the blank. The number one thing student engagement staff can do in 2021 is... How would you answer that?
Yes. Number one thing student engagement staff can do, just, create a community for students. I think that's so important. I think that's really been lost when we've gone online and everyone's at home. Students can't turn around to the person next to them and go, you want to get a drink after uni? Do you want to go grab a coffee while we do our assignment? So I think, really creating a sense of community for students and getting them to be interactive online.
I love it. Steph, that's amazing. Thank you so much for your insights. I'm going to definitely try to book in some of your time so we can debrief on this more.
Amazing. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Steph. I'll see you next week.
Later.
Bye. Very cool. How are you thinking about engaging your students, whether you're a student club leader, a mentor, an ambassador, a staff member, an external provider? How are you thinking about engaging them like a traditional classroom, like TV, through socials? I wonder if you've got any new perspectives or ideas from that conversation we just had. Now, we've got a couple more guests coming up, but in the comments, remember, this is interactive. So if you've got a thought, if you've got a question, if you'd like to pop up and share a perspective, pop it in the comments below and we'll bring it up and tackle it with one of our next and final two guests. So to move on, guest number 5 out of 6 today, and a former guest, as many previous guests have been on the campus experience, is Alexis McKay. Alexis, hello.
Hello, Josh. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are things?
Things are good. Things are good. Yeah, we're enjoying a late burst of summer in Adelaide at the moment, so it's
beautiful.
It's good.
Beautiful. Now, for those of you who didn't see our previous episode or aren't familiar with your work, you're delivering the Women in STEM Careers program. You're doing that for 5 years at the University of Adelaide.
Yep.
5 years.
Pretty amazing.
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years. That's amazing.
Yes. Shall I give a bit of a background?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're the pro. Let's do it. Tell people if they're like, right. So Alexis, what is the Women in STEM Careers program at the University of Adelaide?
You should ask Josh. So the Women in STEM program has been going for 5 years now. We're in our 5th year of operation. What we offer is a wonderful, and just like Steph was talking about, the community. So that's probably one of the biggest things that we offer in this program. Each year, science, engineering, computer science, architecture, all of our STEM disciplines are invited to apply for a personal and professional development program, which we call the Women in STEM Careers program. So what that does is it's a combination of workshops, both personal and professional development, to set our women up for success in what is sometimes going to be a challenging environment in the workforce. So we build resilience and confidence, and we have industry involvement that helps them to build their community and to build their networks to be able to sustain them throughout their careers. So it's a really wonderful community that comes together over the course of a year, which stay together and find their tribe and create this beautiful supportive environment that they can have throughout their studies and then as they go on into their careers. So 5 years of that.
That's incredible. And over those 5 years, one of the things you mentioned was developing that confidence. It comes up a lot. People want to be confident in what they do. Yeah. Have you seen that change the way that that's been delivered in an online space? Are people finding new ways to develop that online confidence, whether it's interviewing, applying to jobs, networking, meeting industry professionals? Or is it the same old approach as before, just online? How do you think about that?
I mean, I think what we focus on in the program around confidence is we do a couple of really impactful personal development sessions up front. So we run the Clifton Strengths approach, where we start from a real position of strength. And I think once people find out what those strengths are and how they can use them practically in the workplace, the confidence starts to build. And we do a resilience workshop, which really gives a toolbox of strategies of how to deal with things when they're hard. So when you're about to go into an exam, you think you're going to fail, or when you're about to go into an interview and you think, I'm not going to be as good as the people around me. We give a toolbox of strategies of how to use those in the moment. And that continues to build that confidence. And then we get industry involved in the program and they get to practice. So we do a speed networking session, which gives that ability to practice. The only real difference last year was that we did it online, and we did things in Zoom rooms, and we use different technologies, and we have our career service have a range of different software platforms that I think saw quite a few more people using last year to practice those those interviewing skills and to record themselves and so on. But I think for me, the confidence is really built in small parts. It's not some big dramatic, I'm going to do this one thing and my confidence is going to boost. It's chipping away using all of these different strategies throughout the course of the year that builds and builds and builds until what you felt when you started the program to what you feel when you leave the program is sometimes visibly and dramatically different, a different person that comes in and goes out. So yeah, it's not that one sort of, I'm going to do this one thing and everything's going to be fine. It's not that. It's actively being involved and taking the learnings and really investing.
I love it. And the return on investment 5 years later, we heard Jeanette reflect a little bit earlier about seeing students come back 3 months, 6 months, a couple of years later and say, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe the impact this has had on me. One thing I wanted to ask is for the people in your programs who are so involved, how does that translate into employability? And I mean, if you have the student who said, okay, I've signed up for the program, but I could just go along, I could listen to it in the background, or I could just go all in. What's the value in going all in?
Yeah, so we definitely have, a range of those people that are watching on the train type engagement where they're not all in. And then we have the people that are boots and all in there, loving every session. And the highly engaged people, I mean, that saying, you get what you put in. And if you don't invest and you don't put in the time and you're not highly engaged, then you're not going to get that return on investment. So the people, and I mean, some of these people, Josh, who have really committed to this program and
they're
what
incredible.
has happened for them, and they're absolutely incredible because they've taken all those learnings and they've chipped away at the confidence and they've chipped away at honing some of those abilities and really starting to change the way they approach things with the online brand, all the things we've been talking about with the previous conversations you've had today. It all comes to building that employability. And so we do a session on online brand, and those highly engaged people are the ones that are out there impressing. They're the ones, at the front of the room with the microphone, because they have engaged and they have joined the student societies, and they've been the ones that really are at the forefront of all of the new things that are happening in their sector. And so when they go to those events, then they're meeting the people, and all of that turns into employability skills. And it's something that you won't get if you don't engage. So you won't be the one at that event meeting those people. And what we do through the program is we introduce in industry to come into the program so that they can use some of these skills, and that translates. They are impressed by that. Industry want to see who's coming through the pipeline and what talent is coming through, and those highly engaged people are the ones that shine because they've developed some of those employability skills. You don't get employability skills just by doing a technical degree. So we recognize that, and I think one of your other guests mentioned that we focus on the technical skills, or we focus on the degrees, but we're not always the best at providing those employability skills. So we recognize that is what industry expects now, and that is what we are trying to provide. And those engaged people, well, it pays dividends.
I love it. The word that really stuck with me there and what you were saying was being at the front, being at the forefront, putting your hand up. And I think one of the master strokes of bringing industry into the room is you go to the room, all the people you want to meet are actually there, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm still terrified and I still need to say something. And so it's like, you can put it off. You're like, oh, well, I'll deal with that once I've got my resume in order. And it's like, well, now you're in the room. Here are the decision makers. What are you going to do now? And it's such an interesting, it's like a preview of what's to come, and you bring it forward and say, it's okay to be,
It's okay to be scared. And the way that we, I guess, set the women up for success for that exact experience is teach them to do an elevator pitch. So, you're in an elevator, you're in with the CEO of Google, and you're like, I've always wanted to work with Google. How am I going to sell myself, between the ground floor and the 35th floor? So, And so we teach them to do that in a really authentic way so that when they go into that room, they're like, hi, I'm Alexis. I'm the diversity coordinator for the Women in STEM program and for the University of Adelaide. And I'm super passionate about supporting women, blah, blah, blah. Off you go. And you know, to have something to say in that moment is just key.
I love it. Speaking of something to say, and we have a lot to say, and I want to be really respectful and appreciative of your time. Speaking of diversity, what's the role of diversity in student support?
Oh, that's a good one, Josh.
Sorry to throw a curveball at you right at the end.
The role of diversity in student support, I guess, you know, working in a STEM faculty that I am, you know, not everybody has a diversity role dedicated to their faculty.
Yes.
But I think because obviously the STEM fields are so underrepresented, I think having somebody there working to change that and to support the students and to, you know, really be there as somebody to, you know, improve and enhance that student experience is so important for people that are underrepresented and for people that are facing challenges and, you know, and are not feeling at times like they belong there. I think it's so important to have somebody there to really support them and to understand what they're going through and to really help them get from here to the end of their degree and out into industry.
That's amazing. Alexis, the work's important. It's been a pleasure. Brief. I'll speak with you soon. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
All right. Bye, Alexis. See you soon. Very, very nice. And Mujaba jumping in the comments. Hey, Josh. Hello. How are you? Great to see you there. Diana's jumping in as well, saying these employability series are fantastic. You change the traditional delivery format whilst getting students involved. We love to do that, and it's great to be able to do that and share with you. If you're tuning in as a student, if you're curious about any of the guests you've seen so far today, look them up on LinkedIn. Figure out, well, what is the University of Adelaide Faculty of ECMS doing in diversity? What is that role that Alexis is in? What is that program? Who are the industry guests? Get curious, lean into it, send a message, and pass on to our guests what you got out of today. Now, final guest, someone very, very special, the CEO, co-founder of Vygo, my mate, Ben.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear and see what looks like a brand new mustache.
This is, yes, it is. This is about the peak of my facial hair. And in my weekly routine, it will disappear tomorrow.
Very good. Not before being called out on LinkedIn in front of
great.
publicly. Now, at Campus Consultancy, we're about championing mustaches, apparently. But at Vygo, in all seriousness, you guys are on a pretty huge mission. You got a pretty massive conviction. Every student deserves to be championed and deserves to champion others. I know Vygo believes that students are able to connect with champions all over the world if they have the opportunity. Tutors, mentors, counselors, advisors. And the Vygo platform puts all this together, puts it in someone's pocket. And now you work with a quarter of the unis in Australia and government partners, educators all over the world. So, mate, with all that happening, thanks for taking some time to chat.
That's all right. No, it's great to be here. Yeah, thank you.
I love it. Mate, I want to talk to you a little bit about, I guess, your experience from a platform perspective, which is a little bit different from some of the other guests. Obviously, all leveraging technology in amazing ways, but you've got something that actually lives in students' pockets. So when it comes to engaging students, you know, one might think, oh, it's going to be really easy because it's in their pocket all the time. Another perspective is, well, there's thousands, if not millions of apps. So I'd love to know from you, in terms of getting students not just to engage with a product, download a product, but get the most out of it. How do you think about that?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, first and foremost, you know, there is, as you know, there's no cookie cutter student. So, you know, obviously one of the things people think about when it's technology and university students, it's like, oh, everyone's going to want a mobile app on their phone and they're going to be super good at it. You know, it's not the case. There's a whole breadth of people who are going through higher education, and some of them have the latest and greatest smartphones. Some of them don't even have a smartphone. Some of them are amazing at using their technology, and some of them aren't. So one of the interesting things about being a tech provider in that is that we have to make the tech accessible for everybody. So if it is that rural student who isn't particularly tech literate, the platform needs to, our mission is to make it support as accessible to that person as it is to the, the 17-year-old gung-ho technology adopter in the middle of Sydney. So one of the things we have to think about is, well, how is our technology evening the playing field for everybody? And so we're not just a mobile app, which is a really important thing that we did. We were mobile first, and that's where we had a lot of our early initial adoption. But very early on, we had to bring in the web platform as well, and a bunch of technical things on the back end of that to make it really as light and engaging as possible. Even down to the video that's used inside the platform. It's about as low bandwidth as you can possibly make it as it comes currently in 2021, so that rural students are having the same experience as metropolitan students.
And speaking of a smarter platform, obviously the banner in the background, I'd love to know something from you that maybe is a more recent innovation, something that's been added to the platform, or something that you're really excited about that maybe in the early days you weren't thinking about as much. Like, it wasn't as clear that students would want that, but obviously you get so much feedback, you're able to adapt. Is there something like that that's in the platform now, whether mobile or desktop?
Yeah, well, I guess one of it was a really interesting step in higher education support services to add a platform to this. So suddenly, you're not walking into an office, or you're not sending an online, email to somebody to, start engaging with support service. The very first thing we did that was quite interesting was, well, now this is an app or a web app that feels like Airbnb, and you can engage that way. That was a very important thing that we did. And then, putting all the tools inside of it, we intuitively added, peer-to-peer chat and video and group video and things like that. Something we didn't expect out of it, by simply adding like a chat service to all the different support services that were there, tutoring, mentoring, counseling, advisory. It really changed the way that students were engaging in support services.
How so?
Well, I mean, traditionally, there's probably a bunch of services on a traditional university campus that seem like they're underutilized because students actually don't want them. But what was really interesting to us is when we added chat, we actually really lowered the barrier of entry for students to interact with a support person, someone who could help them. Something that when we think about disability and equal access and things like that, something that gets overlooked a lot is the amount of students who struggle with anxiety. And that sort of, for a lot of students, it's actually pretty hard to walk into an office or to send that email and say, hey, I need help. That's a really confronting thing to do. And particularly, for international students, it's when they're engaging in these services, it can be unknown about what's the implications of telling this staff member that I need help and that I'm struggling. Like, what happens when I tell the lecturer that I don't understand? But when we added in chat, it lowered that barrier of entry down to a simple, like, let's get started with an emoji, say hi. Like, when we start a conversation that way. And as a result, a flood of new students previously not engaging in these services, suddenly engaging in these services. And sometimes, we're talking like numbers like 3,000% increase in the first month. And a lot of it's happening by chat. That's all relatively, that's been what we've been doing for a couple of years now. But one of the things we've just added in, literally, I think yesterday, and it's coming into the platform the next month in the next update. We're lowering that barrier entry again, another level, where we're giving students the option to use predetermined initial sentences and hellos. So,
right.
there already is that barrier of, okay, I have to identify one-to-one. That's going to be quite confronting. Now there's chat. That's great. But even then, there's still this other next barrier we want to get away from is like, well, a lot of students get to that chat and they're thinking, what do I say? What do I say to an industry mentor? Like someone who I idolize and look up to, like, how do I start a conversation with a counselor? Like, how do I tell them I need some help with something? Or what would a peer mentor even want from me? And so we now are putting auto suggested responses. So we can make that as simple as like, click that, hi, my name is X. I'm looking for help in Y. And I'm really excited about that. And
That's cool. It's almost like the anti-bot. Like you're flipping it. It's like, we know that students are going to be struggling. Like we can look at the data on anxiety. So we know that students are going to be struggling with it. We know there are these different facets. We know it manifests at different years, at different times of year. So at the start of semester, pre-program message can be, hey, I'm worried about my classes, whatever. Versus the end of semester, the pop-up might be, I'm nervous about exams. So I think there's some brilliance there to say, like, those pop-ups can change for demographics, for year levels, for backgrounds, but from the user, not from a bot, it's not the career service giving you an auto response. It's the student saying, I need help with my resume. It's like send. That's brilliant.
And what it does is it immediately normalizes it as well. It might seem so obvious for people who have been in higher education for a while about, what are the normal questions to ask. But for a new student coming in, particularly if it's your second language or first and family, it's like, we don't know what's a dumb question. And so to see that, a typical normal response might be like, hey, I don't know I don't know how to print on campus or something like that. It normalizes, okay, that's normal. I'm happy to put my hand up and say I'm in that category.
Yes. Yeah, wow, that's brilliant. So it's just like by seeing it there, it's like when you go to the frequently asked questions or something, and you say, lots of other people struggle with what to do if I can't find my password. But this makes it something that's people might be hiding from and therefore limiting themselves. And now you're opening that door.
Yeah, and totally. And I think to the question you've been asking everybody about, like, what's most important this year when it comes to support services for students, yes, the main thing is they need more of everything, particularly that peer and social connections and things like that. So we do more and more work like that for universities. But I think one of the things that people might overlook a little bit is students in particular this year, they need permission to engage in support. And the more that we can give them the feeling of permission and invite them into support, I think we'll start to understand really just how many students needed these services. And more about what we do at Vygo is about how do we turn support from this passive thing that a student needs to recognize, I need help, and then needs to take this big leap of faith to go and get that help, and maybe a bit of a journey that could take them weeks or months. Like, how do we turn that into an active experience where support is chasing them and is inviting them in and doing that in a personalized way? That's really the big thing that we're thinking about at Vygo over the next couple of years.
Mate, I love it. I was going to give you the fill in the blank, and maybe we'll do a round 2 on exactly what you said. But my fill in the blank for you was going to be knowing that Vygo's thinking global, working global, connecting people globally, Mentor Academy, a bunch of other amazing initiatives. What does world-class support mean?
True. The first thing that I think about when I see that is it means personalized to the institution, to the student, to this person giving support. Like, there is no one size fits all as good support as this. For me, I would say the overarching way to think about it, and this is our vision, is that world-class support means that every learner, number one, understands their full potential. Number two, is surrounded by the people and the champions who can help them realize that potential. And then 3, is able to invite that learner back in to go and champion somebody behind them. That's, I think if I could take all the technology out of it, that's what world-class support means.
It's so interesting. It makes me think of like one of the changes in education, then I'll let you go, is that idea that it used to be local and now it's global in terms of education, who you can learn from. It used to be linear. It's like, here's this week and next week and the next week. But now people are feeding back in. It's exponential. It can be all over the place. And it used to be in person and now it's digital. And I think when we combine multiple changes like that, and as you say, like, our product's better today than it was 2 days ago. Like, that's insane. Like, I know courses that the final exam wasn't updated 10 years ago and your product's better from 2 days ago. And I'd love to see where does that get us as a sector in a year, 3 years, 5 years.
That's it. Like, that's the exciting thing about modern ed tech. education technology is only really coming into its heyday now. There's a bunch of monolithic, old hat, dusty software that's been implemented in the past, but now what we're seeing is people coming in with fresh perspectives, fresh ideas, taking from other interesting industries like the sharing economy, startup world, from marketplace. Like we're bringing all that in for the first time, and what's exciting about that is it's not like like you said, one release or update to the software every year. Like modern edtech, you should be able to jump into your provider's platform on the App Store and see that they've been updating it every 2 weeks for the last 2 years. That's how you know that these guys, they're keeping you at the absolute edge of what's possible.
I love that. Well, Ben, mate, thank you for coming on. Thank you for being our 6th guest today. It was awesome to hear your insights. I learn more about, I feel like, the world and technology every time I speak with you. So thanks, mate, and all the best for you, Vygo, and the whole crew.
Thanks for having me. Cheers,
Sweet.
guys.
Cool. There you have it, friends. 6 guests today, episode number 50 of Coffee with Campus Consultancy. Now, if you haven't seen some of the previous episodes, they're all up on YouTube. 48 episodes from last year are up, as well as last week's, and obviously today will go up as well. So 50 episodes, the first 48 had a single guest every single time. The last one, 7 in episode 49, and 6 today talking about student engagement and student support. Now, if you love this, we'd love to hear from you. So in the comments, I'd love to know what's one thing you got out of today's live stream. What's one thing you learned, one new perspective, something you're thinking about, and how will you apply it? So you might say, I really loved hearing Jeanette talk about personal brand and what it means when you're not in the room. And I'm going to apply that by being really intentional about it in so-and-so circumstance. You might say, I loved what Julian was talking about with having fun, or Jeremy from Forage talking about what you can do online, and that working at JP Morgan might actually look like working in your bedroom. All these changes are more of the things that we want to learn about, and we don't just want to learn it for ourselves, we want to share it with you. So if you're enjoying this, we'd love to hear from you. What do you like? How can we improve? Is 10 minutes a good amount of time? Is 6 guests a good amount of time in 60 minutes? Please let me know. Pop it in the comments or send me a message on LinkedIn, Josh Farr, or an email, josh@campusconsultancy.org. Now with that, we're early into April. You've got a lot on. Thank you for joining today. Thank you for being so engaged, jumping in the comments, saying hello. And we look forward to being with you next week. So from us, that's the end of Coffee with Campus Consultancy. Have an amazing day, and I will speak with you very, very soon. Bye-bye.